7 at best here with the rain and drizzle, which is likely to pep up again through Saturday evening. Could bring a bit more hill snow for a time, but that fizzles out, and that leads to most places starting Sunday dry. The main exception will again be northwest Scotland, where the winds start to pick up during Sunday. Further rain coming in here. Some rain through the central belt for a time, but here and across southern Scotland it should brighten up. For Northern Ireland, cloudy but mostly dry. For England and Wales, perhaps a bit more sunshine coming through on Sunday. A brighter day. Getting windy once more in the northwest. But again, pretty mild for the middle of February, double digits and into the teens in the south. Goodbye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Lots to get into tonight. Social care, it's an absolute mess, isn't it? We go round in circles every year, different report, different recommendations, and let's face it, pretty much nothing happens. Now, we've got another report out from Age UK telling us what we pretty much already know, basically. It's in a mess. Do we have to just accept now that, you know what? What can we do? Nothing, it seems. Or do you actually believe that there are true solutions to fix the social care problems in this country? If so, what are they? And China, how much of a threat do you think they are to the UK? And what should we do about it? If anything, Liz Truss, by the way, over in Japan at the moment, giving her thoughts. Why? You tell me. And the licence fee, do you pay it? Do you think we should all have to pay it if we want to watch live television? Has it had its day now? Give me your thoughts on that. And what job do you do? Is it your dream job? Was it the thing that you always imagined that you would be doing? Or do you sit there and go, what on earth have I done with my life? I just do what I do for money. We'll have all of that and more coming up tonight. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michelle, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says we haven't got a deal yet in resolving post-Brexit trading arrangements in the Northern Ireland Protocol. He held talks with Stormont leaders this morning in an attempt to resolve the matter and will meet EU leaders in Germany tomorrow amid speculation a deal could be unveiled early next week. The DUP has said progress has been made, but Mr Sunak says there's more work to do.
Well, the test that I've set myself is that we protect Northern Ireland's place in our internal market, that we protect the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that we resolve the practical issues that the protocol is causing families and businesses in Northern Ireland, and crucially that we address the democratic deficit. Those are the issues that we need to work through, and that's what my ministerial colleagues and I will be talking to the EU about.
Lancashire Police has confirmed it's going to conduct an internal review into the Nicola Bulley investigation. It's after the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, questioned why the force has disclosed details of the missing mum's private life during a news conference. Lancashire Police said she suffered from significant issues with alcohol in the past and struggled with menopause. It then referred itself to the police regulator. Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reid says that was the right thing to do.
The police should not be sharing extremely private, personal information about an individual without the consent of that individual, if they are available to give it, and if they're not, then without the consent of their close family members. If they do that, they run the risk that other victims won't feel confident coming forwards in future. So I think it's right this case is now being reviewed. We will see where this particular case comes out, but the principles are that the confidentiality of victims must always be respected by the police.
The SNP has postponed a conference on independence following the resignation of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. It comes as the party's executive committee said a ballot to select a new party leader will close on the 27th of March. Deputy First Minister John Swinney has already announced he won't be entering the race. The Scottish Government has offered healthcare staff an average 6.5% pay rise. Workers would also receive a one-off payment of between £400 and £900. Matt McLaughlin, Unison Scotland's head of health, has called it a credible pay offer that needs serious consideration. The Royal College of Nursing has announced a new 48-hour strike in England. Members from 128 NHS trusts will walk out on the 1st of March. In an escalation, the RCN says, will reduce services to an absolute minimum. Nurses in emergency, intensive and cancer care, all previously exempted, will join the picket lines for the first time. But the union says life and limb care will continue. Around 1,500 ambulance workers in Wales will now join almost 10,000 GMB members across England in a strike on Monday. It's after the GMB union announced its staff in Wales had rejected an offer from the Welsh Government. Meanwhile, ambulance workers in the West Midlands have taken to the picket lines today, with patients facing yet more delays as a result. Members of the GMB and Unite unions are staging a walkout in their long-running dispute over pay and staffing. The Department for Transport has announced a cap on bus fares in England will be extended by 3 months. The £2 cap, which applies to more than 130 bus companies outside of London, was due to end in March, but that's now been extended until the end of June. The aim is to increase passenger numbers, but also to help bus users during the cost of living crisis. Officials in Bulgaria say at least 18 people, including one child, have been found dead in an abandoned truck. 34 migrants, including 5 children, were taken to hospitals in the capital, Sofia, after being found in a compartment of the truck which had been carrying wood. At least 10 are still in a critical condition due to a lack of oxygen in the vehicle. The Bulgarian Interior Ministry says police are trying to track down the truck drivers who fled the scene. 5 police officers have pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder of Tyree Nichols in Memphis last month. Body cam footage at the time showed the 29-year-old being beaten by several police officers. His death caused widespread outrage and renewed a national conversation about race and police brutality. Thousands of homes have been left without power, with dozens of schools closed as Storm Otto hit Scotland and north-east England. The Met Office says winds as high as 80 miles per hour have been recorded, causing trains and flights to be cancelled. Northern Power Grid says around 19,000 homes have been left without power, whilst more than 11,000 have since had their supplies restored. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got the writer, firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry, and a man that has just dashed up the stairs, through the door and onto that seat quicker than a quick thing from Quickland, the political consultant Alex Dean.
Hello.
Good evening to you.
Thank you.
That is good dedication there and good athletic skills that I feel that you displayed then, because I was told you were running very late.
Being dragged out of the pub.
Yeah.
Try and order another drink. They had to drag him out of the pub.
I wish. The trains, as anyone who's travelling today will know, the trains are screwed.
Yeah.
He's here, though. What a trooper. He managed to battle his way in, because Paul and I were just sitting there thinking, what we're going to do to entertain ourselves?
We were going to have a dance, weren't we?
We were going to dance, we were going to tell jokes.
I could still leave.
Well, let's see we'll see how he gets on. If he's no good, we might get rid of him halfway through and me and Paul will just tell jokes again. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here in the studio. It's very much about you at home. What's on your mind tonight? I want to talk to you about Liz Truss. She's in Japan. Does anyone know why? I'm sure I must be missing something very obvious as to why it is Liz Truss that's over there giving these speeches, but whatever it is that I've missed, just tell me, please. She's pondering how much of a threat China is and what should be done about it. I also want to talk to you about social care. That will be coming up in just a few minutes. The licence fee as well. Do you pay it? Do you think we should be paying it? The Director General at the BBC has said he's amazed, pretty much, that so many people are cool with paying it. And also, what's your dream job? I mean, these two are living their dreams, sitting alongside me, talking to you guys.
Absolutely.
But what about you at home? Are you doing what you always anticipated you would do? Or did things not quite work out the way that you envisaged? I want to talk about that a little bit later on in the show as well. But let's kick off, shall we, by talking about social care. A report from Age UK has found that half of patients arriving in ambulances at A&E are over the age of 65 because, they say, essentially social care is being rationed for older people. I'll pick up with you, first of all, mainly to give Alex a chance to get his breath back and to give someone a second to bring the man a glass of water as well. We go around in circles, don't we, on social care in this country. So many reports, so many commissions, investigations, but yet nothing really seems to, or at least it doesn't feel like it gets that much better. Can you ever see a scenario where social care will be fixed in this country? And if so, what does that look like?
It's hard to get away from the truth, I think, Michelle, that it does come down to funding, essentially. Now, I know people will say, well, the easy thing to argue is just throw more money at it. That doesn't always work. OK, it won't solve all of the problems, but it certainly helps. I mean, the system is clearly completely broken. And I think we probably need something like a national care service in this country, created, I think, along similar lines of the National Health Service, free at the point of delivery.
With ring-fenced taxation to fund it?
Well, not necessarily hypothecated taxation, but just paid for out of general taxation in some way. I mean, I wouldn't get hung up on whether it's hypothecated or whether it's just sort of out of general taxation. But I think we don't, I mean, on residential and home care in this country, for example, I think we spend something like 0.7% of GDP. In places like Japan, the Netherlands, Sweden and places like that, it's around about 2%. Now, I think if you underfund in that respect, then you're asking for problems. And we actually spend less on social care today than we did 10 years ago. I think the other elephant in the room in many respects is the staffing crisis that we have in care homes, which has been brought about, I think, in no small measure as a result of the pretty low wages that carers get. And, of course, it's like anything. if you're not being paid well and you're in the middle of a cost of living crisis and you've got to put food on the table and you can find a better job elsewhere, then the chances are that you're going to take it. So all of those things are the problem. But I think really a national care service is probably the only solution at this stage.
Yeah, and by the way, we talk about, don't we, the staffing shortages as well in this whole care sector. I can't resist. Sorry, I know you'll go, Michelle, going on about it again. But let's not forget, we lost so many people, tens of thousands of people as it happens, in that sector because we had vaccine mandates and we forced people out of those roles if they didn't have those vaccines, the COVID vaccines. I can't help but get that off my chest. We've not managed to get you water yet. I don't know why. I've not been subtle in my hints. It is on its way, I hope. But your thoughts on the care thing, Alex?
One of the reasons that what Paul says has force to it is that we have a population that is increasingly ageing. Which is obviously a truism. We're all getting older. I mean, that the proportion of us who are geriatric, who are elderly, who are no longer of a working age is increasing. When the national health system was created in the UK, we would work until we were 65, and your life expectancy, on average, would be a few years beyond that, 5, 6 years. 70 had been a truism from the Bible to the beginning of the 20th century, broadly speaking, as a lifespan. Now we're living into our 90s, and if anything, we're retiring a little earlier, which means we've often got people who are still with us, God bless them, and should we all hope to be so old. But they are increasingly unwell, and they're in a society that owes them a debt and needs to look after them. If at the same time we're contributing the same amount, or indeed less in real terms than we once did, there is a question about what we're doing and what we value and prioritise as a society. I think how we treat your elderly is one of the basic tests in a civilised society. I just add one other thing. We pay a little over the European average in health and social care. We pay above the average in health and we pay below the average in social care. That is a false economy and a false saving, because when you skimp on money on that, very often the people concerned wind up in hospital.
Do you think we need some kind of cultural shift as well? Because in this country, there is quite the approach of, right, my parents are elderly, let me put them into a home. If you travel to various different places, I remember staying, for example, with a family in Vietnam, in their home. And I mean, it was every single generation squeezed into what was like a one-bedroomed house. And they really took great pride in caring for their relatives. I don't think they would have dreamt of kind of outsourcing that. So do you think perhaps we could learn from those kind of countries and I don't know, see a return to caring for your parents in your house as opposed to elsewhere?
Well, my mum's probably watching this. The last thing I would want her to think is that she's going to start coming and living with me as a result of what I say on this programme.
Oh, right.
Bless her. No, I'm only joking. I do, actually. I think it's partly economics in terms of proper funding and so on, which we've touched on. But absolutely, I think the importance of community, the importance of those relational links with close members of your family. And I'm not necessarily saying that parents should always go and live with their children, because obviously family circumstances will be different. But I think we probably do need to be a bit more innovative as a society in terms of how we might encourage that sort of culture. So, for example, I think I'm correct in saying that in Singapore, they give grants to people to continue living near their parents, so that if their parents need assistance for whatever reason, their family members are close by. And I think that's an idea, that's a kind of example of innovative thinking, which probably can ensure that those relational links remain strong, and that, you know, individual elderly parents are not always reliant on the state to come to their rescue if they slip over, if they need particular assistance at a particular time. We're not very good at that as a society.
One of my viewers has just got in touch, Alex, Elizabeth just called, saying, Michelle, vulnerable and elderly people should never be a profit-making enterprise. Do you think that there should be such a thing as a care home sector that is specifically for profit?
Well, we have one now.
I know,
there are many.
Saying that's wrong.
Well, it's a bit like the debate over private schools or in private healthcare, and you'll find Paul and I imagine, on different sides of it. When people choose to pay to send their children to a private school, they not only pay for that child's education, they continue to pay their tax, which goes into our state education system. When they choose to have healthcare given to them privately, they choose to pay for that healthcare privately, and they also contribute to the state healthcare system. Equally, there is nothing wrong with wanting to give yourself or your parents, if that's who we're talking about, a better quality of life in a different kind of care home from that which the state might be able to provide for them. And indeed, you are taking a burden from the state in so doing. So I think, with no offence to Elizabeth, I think it's quite easy to look down the wrong end of the telescope and say you shouldn't make a profit on this. Whereas, in fact, the profit motive is one of the best devices to take people out of the state sector, because there are others who will provide a better care and a better facility for them to go to, and whilst they're doing that, still pay their taxes into the system.
Are you an older person? How would you feel about perhaps moving back in with your children and having them care for you? And are you a perhaps younger person, and how would you feel about having your parents back and taking on that kind of caring role yourself? Paul, I can't really talk about social care without talking about the wider impact on the NHS. Yesterday, the story broke about the Royal College of Nursing saying that they're going to have an extended 48-hour strike in March. This time it will have what I will call a broader scope to it. So last time, areas such as critical care were perhaps exempt and cover provided. This time it will be different. What do you think to that?
Look, it's never an enjoyable thing. It's never something that any worker in that kind of industry, and I say this as a firefighter who's been on strike, ever takes pleasure in doing. And it's genuinely, I think, a last resort for people. And I've no doubt that those people who are going to be taking strike action in those sectors feel it's a last resort as well. But, you know, the bottom line is they are trade unionists. As trade unionists, they're entitled to take part in a democratic ballot to withdraw their labour if necessary. We know there are sectors and institutions where that isn't possible, the police and the army and so on. So whilst that right is afforded to them, we have to expect that from time to time, very infrequently and only when absolutely necessary, those workers are going to take that action. And, you know, historically, they don't do it very often. We must accept that they do it very, very rarely. So you can bet that when it does happen, they probably feel a legitimate sense of grievance.
Paul, you just mentioned the army, and it's reminded me that a month ago we were discussing whether the army should be able to strike, and you said you couldn't answer, you needed more time to think about it. You've had a month.
Well, I haven't been thinking about it for a month.
But you've not gone to bed thinking about Alex's question?
I do think about Alex a lot in bed, but not that particular.
So you're still not willing to say whether the military should be able to strike or not?
No, I think it is a legitimate thing for a government to say, look, if you are there in the service of your country in terms of the defence of your country, or if you're the police force, then part of the deal is a covenant almost, that we make sure you have decent terms and conditions, we look after you, but, you know, in those circumstances, we're not going to allow you to take strike action. So I'm not going to be going out with a placard saying defend the right of the army to strike.
But what do you make? Because I must confess, and this isn't news to anyone that was watching yesterday, because I said it then, I am uncomfortable about the notion of nurses within critical care going on strike. I personally believe that there should be the exemptions that existed in the last RCN strike, which meant that if you were in critical care, if you're in A&E, ICU, whatever, you will be exempt from striking. Other nurses can go off, they can strike, they can take up the cause, but you're protecting those kind of life essential services. Where do you stand on that?
I've been watching the nursing union with interest as they speak about this, because it seems to me they're unwilling to confront the reality of the outcome of the strikes, whether people on critical care go on strike or not. Let's be clear, it'll be worse if people in critical care actually go out, but it's bad per se. Nurses going out will have a deleterious outcome on patient care, and it will have a deleterious outcome at margins on length of life. You can't withdraw labour from the healthcare system at this scale without it having an impact on patients. So on the one hand, they will say, you know, we love our jobs, we care about it, we never want to strike. If you are criticising the nurses, you're criticising the wrong thing, because when nurses go out and strike, they're striking for patients. Well, that's speaking slightly with a forked tongue from the union who was saying that today, because it seems to me that they are unwilling, even on their own terms, to confront the reality of their position. Their position really is patients will suffer today, and that has to happen in order for patient outcomes in the future to be better. That's the best version of their position.
So is your view, Alex, that actually there should be legislation passed that prevents nurses from taking strike action?
No.
In the same way as the police, for example?
No.
I think there should be. I think there should be in critical care.
I didn't say that at all, did I?
No,
I was saying they should be honest about the outcomes of withdrawing their labour, which you rightly say they do rarely. But when they do, it's going to have profound negative effects. And indeed, the last strike, even though they didn't go out in critical care, meant 140,000 postponed operations. I defy anyone to pretend that's not a bad patient outcome.
But you do accept, by definition, if you're saying that there shouldn't be legislation introduced to outlaw it, you do accept by definition that as members of a trade union, like all members of trade unions, they have the right to withdraw. They should have the right to take part in industrial action if they're voted to do that.
Which I've conceded each time. You always revert to pointing out someone's right to strike.
I'm trying to elicit your opinion.
Whether or not. No, you're not.
No, you're not. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm trying to elicit your opinion.
You are seeking always to suggest that the other person doesn't believe in the right to strike, rather than defending whether they should.
I think you're being defensive about your own opinion. I'm trying to elicit whether or not you wanted legislation brought in to ban it, or whether you defended the
I don't know how many times I can say no, I don't.
Strike action. Well, I asked you the question, you answered it. Simple.
Well, there's two people here that think that there shouldn't be legislation at all when it comes to nurses striking. I have a slightly different view. I think, fine, I would prefer that they didn't, but I accept that nurses will go on strike, but I would prefer there to be some form of legislation that meant that in the most critical areas, that wasn't possible to happen. I know that nurses are in a tricky position. Of course, I want them to receive a pay rise, and of course, I absolutely respect our nurses, but I just think there are some critical care functions that should almost be ring-fenced for the safety of anybody who needs it. I pretty much wrote that on Twitter yesterday, and I cannot even repeat a fraction of the names that I have been called last night and today for having the audacity to say that. Where do you stand on it all? Give me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, or you can reach me at Twitter. But be nice. At Michelle Dewbs. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll have some of your thoughts on that last topic, but I also want to talk to you about China. Liz Truss was in Tokyo today. I mean, if anyone even knows why, please can you tell me? Anyway, it's all about whether or not China is a real threat to the world, and if so, what should be done about it? I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock on this Friday night. The writer, firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry is alongside me, as is the political consultant Alex Dean. Lots of you guys have been getting in touch about that conversation we were just having about social care and the NHS. Tim says the following: my wife works in the care sector. She gets just £10 an hour and is constantly asked to do more hours due to shortages. In the last 3 days alone, she has done 2 15-hour shifts. See, I think it's a really poor reflection on our society that carers get just above the minimum wage. I really do. I don't know why we don't value our carers in this country more. Because, I mean, if you was getting a job stacking shelves in a supermarket, you'd be earning more than that, wouldn't you? Michael says the overseas fund should be scrapped and the money given to councils to help fund social care. It's disgraceful how we treat our elderly. I don't know if you... do you mean foreign aid there? I don't know. Robert, I'm trying to get your views on the screen, by the way, and I'm not having much joy, so I am trying to give you your moment of fame. But technology is letting me down. Robert says... Paul Embry wants a national care service. Well, what about when they go off on strike? Says Spike. I don't know. Right, let's move on though, shall we? We'll come back to those kind of strikes, I am sure, at some point again in the future. But for now, former Prime Minister Liz Truss has made her first international speech today, calling for the West to take a robust stance, I tell you, on China. This is all about trying to protect Taiwan. The first question that I've got, Alex Dean, is why is Liz Truss, the person in Japan, giving this address?
Because there's a group called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, which is a campaign group that aims to foster more discussion about how democratic countries should deal with the rise of China and how it should approach questions over whether China is a threat to the global West and a threat to democracies. And not that I'm involved in it, I assume that their latest event or conference or something is in Japan. So she's been invited to go and speak at it. But I mean, former prime ministers and moreover, given that she was in the job for rather longer, former foreign secretaries do pop up on the international stage quite often. And the difference, I think, between Liz Truss and some of her predecessors is the speed with which she's been willing to do it. Most people who leave office normally give it a period of silence before they start shouting the odds again. Indeed, I thought the most flattering thing about John Major was the quiet dignity that he had after leaving office. Then he just started commenting occasionally. In the end, he couldn't help himself and he was talking about everything. Liz Truss has gone almost straight to that by speaking in a high-profile event so quickly. But we shouldn't be surprised by this. And the other point I'd make is that one of the questions, the difficulties a Prime Minister tends to have is what to do about or with a former Prime Minister. And this Prime Minister's got more of those than usual.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative job as well, being a former Prime Minister of this country, so it seems. But what do you think to her point? Because among other things, what she was saying is we almost need to have this new alliance, like an economic NATO-type creation, if you like, against China. Would you agree with a concept like that?
I'm slightly wary of the whole approach, to be honest. Look, I mean, I have little love for the Chinese regime. I mean, it's clearly an authoritarian regime. I don't think I would particularly, as a political activist, like to live under it. But I'm equally a bit worried about the way the world seems to be kind of militarising at the moment, and the way that leaders who I think should, where possible, try to speak the language of peace and dialogue and engagement, seem, I think, all too often these days to bang the drum for war. And that concerns me. And it concerns me that it's almost as if we always need an enemy in the West. You know, it was the Soviet Union during the Cold War, then it was Islam, now it's Russia and China and whatever. And it's almost as if we kind of look for that enemy purposely because we feel that
peculiarly kind of self-loathing position to look at Russia invading Ukraine.
If you'd let me finish the point, then we might be able to have some dialogue ourselves rather than bellicosity, Alex.
Go on then, get on.
So the point that I'm making is we need to try to avoid another Cold War if we can. But I think at the moment that the kind of sabre rattling from certain people is not particularly helpful and not really in the country's interests ultimately.
It's a peculiar worldview and peculiarly self-lacerating to look at Russia invading Ukraine and China's attitude towards Taiwan and say, well, the West must want enemies all the time, it must be down to us. That's all I was going to say.
Well, I mean, in terms of Taiwan, I tend to think, actually, the whole debate about Taiwan is much more complex and nuanced than some people give it credit for. It's often cloaked in the language of good and evil. It's often cloaked in the language of angels and devils, and I don't think, actually, it is.
Well, do you think Taiwan's going to invade China?
I think with Taiwan, for example, there are only 13 nations that actually recognise Taiwan as a sovereign state, one of which is the Vatican City. Not even America recognises Taiwan as a sovereign state. So my point, Alex, is, and this speaks to what I was saying at the beginning, often these disputes are much more complex and nuanced than people give them credit for, and simply speaking the language of bellicosity and banging the drum for war is not always helpful.
You were interested in
and doesn't actually help to bring about.
I think my memory is just about long enough to remember the beginning of those paragraphs where you said civility was important. In Taiwan, they have a democracy where the government can lose an election, the opposition takes power, and then that party loses and they switch back again peaceably and without issue. They have transparent financial situations. They respect patents. They have the rule of law. They are.
I'm not calling for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Let me just be clear about that, in case that's what you were deducing from that.
It was pretty much needed because when you
I don't think it was, actually.
When you were saying it's much more nuanced than people say.
No.
Well, no, it's not. Taiwan's not going to invade China, are they?
No, come on.
The aggression is all one way.
Alex, don't be silly. Saying that a historical territorial dispute is nuanced does not mean you want a major power to invade that particular country.
You think China's got a right to you think China's got a right to claim that island?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there's a legitimate claim by China, but equally, I think there are legitimate arguments the other side. It's one of these. It's a bit like Catalonia. Actually, when you look at the two sides, both can lay legitimate claims to a particular place. The answer to it, I don't think, is war. The answer to it is not war. The answer is engagement and dialogue and some sort of negotiated outcome.
But it's China, isn't it, that are saying that they want this all back by, I think their deadline is 2050, and it's China that's saying, and we will use force if necessary.
Michelle, China are saying, well, Taiwan has always been part of China. Now, you can disagree with that view, but my point is it's not such a far-out view that it's not possible to articulate it in reasonable debate. By all means, disagree with it, but don't try to represent it as an outlandish view, because anyone who does probably doesn't grasp the historical aspects of it.
OK, Paul, grasp this, because it's very easy. Oh, it's all so complicated, we probably shouldn't bother about it.
No, we shouldn't bother. No, I didn't say
the aggression is coming from China and China alone. It's not the West being aggressive, it's not Taiwan being aggressive, it's China being aggressive. Given your dislike of bellicosity, newfound but very welcome, that's where your attention should be.
But then to Paul's point then, that not many places and people, etc., and regimes do recognise...
Because the Chinese say you can't. The Chinese say there is only one China and you must recognise us and not them. Of course, at one point, that argument worked the other way around and everyone recognised Taiwan, then the Republic of China, rather than the People's Republic.
So do you think we should be concerned about China?
Hugely.
And do what about it then?
Look, there are two kinds of businesses. There are those who've been there's those that know they've been hacked by Chinese sources, and there are those that don't know that they've been hacked by Chinese sources. Most major enterprises have some kind of leak or approach from China, whether it be about their patents or about their business secrets or something else. So point one on that is clamping down on it. Interestingly, I've seen claims about China respecting patent law a bit more nowadays because they're in favour of the death penalty for those who get caught breaching things. Well, that's tremendous and civilised once again. So that's part one. Part two would be that Taiwan is a liberal democratic nation, and we should be thinking very, especially given the commitments that have been made to it by America and others, about what defending Taiwan may look like. In the end, the Taiwanese are not going to roll over.
What does defending Taiwan look like, Alex, in your world?
The Taiwanese are very likely to be able to resist some kind of incursion, but will need more
Seriously?
military...
They're tiny compared to China.
You know what, Paul? It's much more nuanced and complicated than you might realise. First of all, it's quite difficult to mount an island invasion. Second of all, unless you want to bomb everything, and one of the things you want to do is to acquire a place peaceably, then you're not going to carpet bomb something.
Taiwan pales into insignificance in terms of military power compared to China. You must recognise that.
Well,
you must recognise.
That's fascinating. So the exercises.
It's a statement of fact, Alex.
So the exercises that the Taiwanese run every year and are internationally observed, you just think that's for the birds. It's good to know, because if someone tried to mount D-Day style landings on Taiwan as the Chinese war game out, they don't need to.
I just think
that's amazing. This is real insights we're getting. It's very helpful.
I just think it's fanciful to suggest that a relatively small country like Taiwan would be able to resist an incursion.
And that's just what they said about Ukraine against Russia.
I hope that it doesn't happen, and I would condemn China if they were to do it. However, we need to keep a sense of realism in the debate.
And some would say as well about you say, yes, Ukraine is very small, and people said exactly the same thing about Ukraine not being able to defend themselves, but actually it's not necessarily Ukraine defending themselves, it's Ukraine and half of the world.
Do you think the US should send... Do you think the US and the West should send military support if in the event?
You love asking questions as if they're prerogative. We've already made these commitments,
It's a debate,
Paul.
Alex. You get questions. They might make you uncomfortable, but you're going to have to live with getting questions to elicit what your position is.
Do you think we don't? Do you think we should let them suffer and die? It's just a rhetorical question.
Maybe answer my question first. Do you think the West should put boots on the ground?
I said yes already. I said yes already.
I didn't hear you. That's interesting. So essentially a third world war then.
Oof. If that's not a
that's the reality. That's the reality. We need to be a bit more level-headed.
We're teetering our way into a third world war. That was the point we've just been ending that conversation on. Where do you stand on it? Give me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs. I'm going to come back in 2 minutes, and when I do, I want to talk to you about the BBC TV licence. Do you still pay it? 159 quid a year, I think it is now. Is it time to scrap it for good? I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co. and we're with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me the writer, firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry and the political consultant Alex Dean. Lots of compliments about you two coming in tonight. People saying that they love this panel. So do I. Mark says, I love Fridays. These guests are the best. I agree. Oh, yes, Richard says, Michelle, you forgot to introduce Dewbs & Co. as the best debate show on television. Yes, I did. That was my new introduction, and I forgot that. I shall remember it on Monday. Well, not Monday because I'm away, but when I come back, I will. Right, we've just been talking about China, whether or not it's a threat. Lee says China is not a threat. It's us in the West merely threatening ourselves by relying on cheap trade goods. It's simple. Less reliance on cheap goods equals less threats. Patrick says, is there a connection between Truss visiting Japan and all the hysteria about balloons and UFOs? Bernard says, the baffling thing for me is why do any Western country deal with China? They are an authoritarian government. Michelle, it does seem to me our government cherry picks those countries it will call to task depending on the detrimental effect it might cause to us. We will never face up to China full on, no matter what they do. I think it was David Cameron, wasn't it, who took, you'll remember...
2015 state... yeah, but there was a state visit. I was at the dinner and somebody within my earshot came out of the dinner and said, I think we bowed a bit low on that one. I think they were right. In retrospect, it was a mistake, I think, to salaam quite as we did to the Chinese Premier.
Well, I think times have definitely moved on from those days, haven't they? Have you got a TV licence? Moving on. Apparently, the Director-General of the BBC has said it's amazing that most people are still willing to pay that licence fee, which he likened to a forced payment. £159 a year, I think it is, Paul Embry. Is it time that the whole thing was just scrapped now? Not the BBC, the licence fee, to be clear.
Not yet, I don't think.
Well, when then?
I've got many criticisms of the BBC, but not yet. I mean, the BBC, I think, when it's good, the BBC can be brilliant. I mean, if you think of classic shows over the years, comedies, sports programmes...
The Apprentice.
Documentaries. I've never watched that one personally.
Wonderful. Especially in 2006, it was amazing.
Completely missed that. Invariably, you think of the BBC because the BBC has often been at the root of really top quality dramas and whatever. But I think the truth is there is nowadays in the BBC a very obvious kind of culturally liberal bias, something that Andrew Marr, who was a BBC man to his core, admitted in an interview. He said it's a cultural liberal institution and that kind of infects its output in many respects. And I think there has been legitimate questions about the BBC adopting, often unknowingly, you know, in a way that's not deliberate, partisan positions on particular political, social, cultural questions and whatever. I like the idea of a channel, especially in these days of rampant commercialism. I like the idea of a channel where there's no adverts for a start. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but you need to be able to sell your gold.
No,
I
do, and I think, you know, we may well get to a point where I think there's such a rebellion among the populace against the TV licence fee that there may well be no option for the government to say, OK, we're scrapping it. I don't think we're at that position yet. I don't particularly want us to be at that position yet.
Many of my viewers are in touch saying they're certainly at that position and they have scrapped their TV licence. Alex Dean, your thoughts?
The alleged quality of output, which is a claim one might dispute, is irrelevant as to whether or not people should be compelled at potential point of imprisonment for not paying for the BBC. And it seems to me your question was actually completely reasonable about whether or not, whatever you think about the BBC, is this model required to fund it, which I'm not sure what Paul's position was, listening to him. But I do think the time has well passed when we should be compelled in this way. Not least, I note, because it's one of the most frequently arising reasons for the prosecution of women in this country. Women, generally speaking, more law-abiding, more peaceable, less violent, and therefore commit fewer offences. One of the main reasons that they are summoned to appear in magistrates' courts is non-payment of the licence fee. Complete waste of time, and indeed sometimes with bad consequences. So I think about that too. And I also think that the suggestion that the absence of advertisements is enough of a reason to be able to compel a population to pay for something which otherwise they'd be able to...
I was just saying, I like that. I like that.
Well, I know, but your preference is a fatuous reason to compel other people...
No, Alex, I was simply making the point that, for me... I'm not suggesting that should be everybody's reason for keeping the BBC. I'm simply saying that in these days of rampant commercialism, it's quite nice, in my view, to watch a channel that has no adverts.
Doesn't matter, then, does it?
Extend that and say, I'm imputing that view to everybody.
It doesn't matter, then, does it? Because you would choose to pay for it.
No, I mean, look, I think...
Would you, if it was optional? Would you choose? So if it was optional, so if it was not an enforced thing, and they said, actually, you know what, we're going to remove the compulsion, we're going to remove the mandate, but we do still want to get some form of revenue in from this licence, so we're going to make it optional. If you want to support the BBC in this way, you can pay £159, but you don't have to. Would you choose to pay it?
I'm not sure during a cost of living crisis I would choose to pay a particular fee or tax that I'm not obliged to pay. That doesn't mean...
Why not? It's a uniquely good cultural product. You said, think of all those good shows.
But, it would be, I think, silly to suggest that people should volunteer to pay something that they're
I didn't say they should, I just asked if you would.
I think it is a form of taxation, but we do have all sorts of forms of taxation and fees in all sorts of areas of life which we're obliged to pay, and we can say we shouldn't be obliged to pay that. It's the national broadcaster. It's always come with a fee. Now, the day may come when that changes. I'm just making the point. I don't think yet that day is here, and I don't think it's too unreasonable that we're asked to pay that fee.
There's a different point here. It's about the free speech issue that is not about the BBC's, but everybody else's, where everybody else who wishes to communicate with you, you may not like the method, but wishes to communicate with you for free by dint of that communication being paid for by adverts, and you wishing, not you, but one wishing to listen to that exchange is interfered with by the requirement, as long as you want to have broadcasting receptacle equipment to be able to hear it, you have to pay that separate fee. That is akin to wanting to go and see, just thinking of your preferences, Paul, I don't know, choose Cats or Starlight Express, and being told that in order to go and see that, you've got to pay for Les Mis. And you would say, well, I don't want to see Les Mis. And I say, well, why not? It's a uniquely good cultural product. If you think of a good play, you always think of Les Mis. You better pay this, and if you don't, you can go to prison if you try and watch Cats.
Yeah, but you don't have to watch Les Mis.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
You don't have to. You don't have to watch 40 hours repeats on BBC Two if you choose not to. But you would have to admit that it's great quality comedy, isn't it?
Throw enough darts at the dartboard, some of it's OK.
Well, don't forget, by the way, you used to have a TV licence just if you had a television. Nowadays, of course, it's if you watch live television or if you watch the iPlayer as well. I have to say, lots of you getting in touch saying that you don't have a TV licence because you don't tick those boxes I was just saying. You stream your content post the event or you watch it via YouTube or whatever. Anyway, your thoughts, keep them coming in. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your insights. Susie says, Michelle, I can't believe Alex is still without water. He's not. We brought water in. The fella's necked it.
Came in a mug.
In one. I know. So, yeah, we're not that cruel. I wouldn't torment him to that extent. I might even get him another drink as well. In the break, don't go anywhere, and I will see you in 2 minutes. When I come back, I want to ask you, what is your dream job? Are you doing it right now? If not, why not? I'll see you in 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I am keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock tonight, you lucky people. And I'm lucky too because in the studio keeping me company, I've got the writer, the firefighter and the trade unionist Paul Embry and the political consultant Alex Dean.
Cheers.
And look everyone, it's Friday, it's my favourite part of the week. We get to do a little cheers. Well actually, my arm's long enough to do. Paul Embry with the worst pun I've ever seen.
If that was a pub, you'd send it back, wouldn't you?
If that was the pub, I most certainly
Or you'd
would
put a flake in it or something.
Yeah, you didn't see it, actually. When it arrived a couple of minutes ago, it had the biggest head I've ever seen. I don't know where that head's gone. You must have supped it off
I think they were trying to send me a message, actually, about a big head or something.
Oh, I'm saying absolutely nothing. I'm saying absolutely nothing. Right, you guys have been getting in touch. A lot of you. What's the matter with you?
Nothing.
What's the matter with him?
Nothing.
Oh, he's off again.
What's going on now?
Nothing. You didn't. It was complete innuendo. Don't worry.
What? That is. I can assure you that it's not like me to listen innuendo. That is because I am trying very hard to be a little Miss Professional and focusing on my next segment, and I'm very disappointed if indeed I missed.
An innuendo is an Italian suppository. Did you know that?
Do you know
Very good.
Yes, I'll tell you what, an innuendo is something that normally makes me chuckle deep inside.
I'm here all week.
I'm astonished that I missed it. I'm going to rewind it when I get back home. Right, a woman in America quit her supermarket job, and now, get this, everyone, she makes £4,000 per month building virtual houses on a video game. Now, a survey last year found that only a third of UK workers are generally happy in their jobs most of the time. Are you one of them? Are you happy in your job? And what is your dream job? Let me start with you, Alex Dean.
I love my job. I love running a team. I love working in the city. I love providing counsel and advice to companies. But I also believe in public service. Unfashionably enough, I would like to be a member of Parliament.
Would you?
I would.
There you go.
I was going to try and hazard a guess as to which party it might be, but I think
you would if we had a little longer, you might narrow it down.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've got time to try and figure it out.
What's the old saying that anyone who claims to want to be an MP automatically disqualifies themselves from entering Parliament in the first place?
What about you, Paul Embry? Are you living your dream when it comes to work?
I mean, I'm very lucky to be a firefighter. I enjoy the job. Gives you a great sense of reward and vocation. My dream, I mean, I would have loved to have been a professional footballer. I played quite a bit of football when I was a kid to quite a reasonable standard, but it didn't happen. I often think I would have liked to be a journalist in the days of Fleet Street. When that was really the hub of British journalism.
Where you could get away with anything.
Well, that's right. Big expense accounts, spending every afternoon in the pub and whatever. Good unions in those days, of course. That would have been, I think, up my street. I would have actually liked to be a lawyer as well. Something that resonates, I'm sure, with Alex.
Yeah, been there, done.
I wouldn't mind earning his money for a start.
I can't believe.
Work harder, Paul.
I can't believe that neither of you've both just sat there. I gave you free rein. I didn't interrupt either of you. I was asking if you're doing your dream job, if you're loving your life and all the rest of it. Neither of you alluded to sitting on here with me.
Well, you didn't allude to it with us either.
Yes, I didn't allude to it.
You bided your time, were you?
I was expecting one of you to have brought it up.
Well, I am living my dream being on this panel. How is that?
Good.
Nowhere I would rather be, even though we were supposed to go for a drink, the three of us afterwards, and you ditched us because you've double booked.
You binned us.
We were supposed to be going for a drink after this show. By the way, can we get a focus on this guy and the speed at which he drinks, please?
I've always been on this.
Like a fish.
Have you seen that? I've never seen anything like that. Are you like...
It's not big and it's not clever.
You're a serious competitor.
He's preparing for being a member of Parliament.
Yeah, fastest beer supper
the
in
training.
the land. But yes, we were supposed to be having a cheeky one. And then I don't know how I forgot this. Because I've got to drive back to Hull on the way home.
We've been stood up.
You're welcome.
Stood up by Dewbs.
You can get in my car and come back to Hull with me. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Steve says, I'm a hypnotherapist and it's a fantastic job improving people's lives. I wouldn't mind doing that. That'd be very interesting. I'm doing my dream job, says Clive, as a freelance editor of military history books. That would be very interesting.
It's interesting.
My dream job would be the Michelle and Della show, The Beauty and the Beast, says Mr. Della. Interesting. Lots of fascinating things coming in. I always wanted to be a dancer, by the way, but it quickly dawned upon me that I've got absolutely no rhythm whatsoever. Right, look at the time. It flies by, doesn't it, when you are having fun. That's all I've got time for. Thank you, chaps.
Thank you
I'm
very
off next week. Woohoo! Bit of family time for me. So I'll see you in a week's time. Have a good one, and I'll see you then. Lawrence Fox.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.